In this video, we're going to develop a template that will help solve return on investment and residual income problems for a company, and we can solve for these values for the original activities of the company and also for any additional activities that the company may want to pursue. So we've got some assumptions up here at the top that are the current activities for a company and the contribution margin ratio and the other information. And then the company has a potential to pursue an additional product that has the values here in column C. So these are the ones originally in the template, but of course, you can use this template to put other inputs in as well. So I'm first just going to save this template and save it as an example problem, because we may want to do other problems with the original template. Okay, so in this particular case, the company's current sales are 25 million and the contribution margin ratio is 30%. So we're going to multiply those two things together to get the contribution margin in dollars for the company, which is 7,500,000. And it lists the fixed expenses as 4,500,000. So that will give us the net operating income of 3 million. Now, this company has average operating assets of $10 million and a minimum required return target set by the managers of 25%. Okay, so some basic calculations that are just measures of performance here are the margin. And so the margin is simply going to be the net operating income divided by the sales. And so the margin here is 12%. The turnover is based on using the assets to generate sales. And so in this case, the sales divided by the average operating assets will give us the turnover. And it's about 2.5. And then the return on investment is going to be the net operating income divided by the average operating assets. So the ROI here is 30%, and that does exceed the minimum required rate of return on the company's assets. Now, another slightly different measure of performance is residual income. So down here, we're just going to reference the average operating assets to make this simple. And then reference the net operating income. Now, the minimum required return stated in dollars is going to be the 25% times the average operating assets. And then residual income is simply the net operating income minus the minimum required return. So that's the amount in dollars that the company is currently exceeding its specified target. Okay. Now, what's in column C here is an additional opportunity that the company may want to pursue. And keep in mind, it may have alternative potential investments. And it's going to take an investment of $500,000 in average operating assets. So the goal of this analysis is to determine, would they want to pursue this option? And what would the company look like after this is pursued? Now, the use of this template can simply be only for the current operations, in which case we can just put in zeros for the values in this column C. Okay, so in this case, the contribution margin for the new opportunity would be the 1.25 million in sales it's expected to generate times the contribution margin ratio. This is expected to add in 185,000 to fixed expenses. So the contribution margin minus the fixed expenses would give us the net operating income. And as we said, it would require a $500,000 investment in assets. Okay, so the margin would be the net operating income divided by the additional sales for the new project. And the turnover would be the same. Formula just for the additional dollars, it would be the sales divided by the average operating assets. So this has the same turnover, this project does, as the original project. And then, of course, the ROI we see here is the net operating income divided by the average operating assets. So it's about 25.5%. We'll again here reference the average operating assets and the net operating income. And so the minimum required return on this particular project would again be 25% times the 500,000. So residual income is the net operating income minus the minimum required return. So in both cases here, this project has an ROI of 25.5%, and so it exceeds the minimum. It has a positive residual income, so those two things are good measurements for this project. Now let's look at what the entire company would look like after adding this project. We would add together the sales. In this case, the contribution margin will be a little bit different. We would add together the contribution margin, and then we'll just calculate the combined contribution margin ratio. That would be the new contribution margin divided by the combined sales. All right, the fixed expenses we would combine. So if we combine the net operating income as well, that'll be 3,127,500, and we would combine the net average operating assets. We'll assume that the minimum required return remains 25%. All right, so the question is, well, what would the margin be for the company as a whole? Well, margin, as we see here, is net operating income divided by sales. So that's 11.91%. The turnover then, we can see, is sales divided by the average operating assets. And then the ROI is the net operating income divided by the average operating assets. And you can copy these particular formulas over if you prefer. All right, we'll do that here. So we reference the operating assets, we reference the net operating income, and then the minimum required of return. Let's calculate that as the minimum required return times the assets. And we can see the new residual income, which of course is just the sum of the previous two residual income amounts. Now, the issues that come into play when using this is that this project appears to meet the minimum return requirement and it has positive residual income. The only reason not to do it would be if perhaps a manager or executive is compensated based on having an ROI that is higher than, say, the previous year or higher than the current company, and the ROI is slightly lower. So that could cause some possibility that this project might be turned down, and yet it seems to add both to the residual income and meet the target.